This car saved Porsche from bankruptcy. It sold 175,000 units. It rescued a dying legend. And then it started exploding. Not all of them, just the ones they decided weren't worth protecting. This is the story of the Porsche 996. By the mid-1990s, Porsche was genuinely dying. The last air-cooled masterpiece, the 993, was an extraordinary piece of engineering, but it spent a full 120 hours on the assembly line. Hand-assembled air-cooled engines were tearing black holes through the company's cost sheets. Sales in the American market had collapsed from 30,000 units to barely 3,000. Tightening emissions regulations, sluggish production lines, and competitors with falling costs left the executives with a single option: swallow their German pride and call for outside help. CEO Wendelin Wiedeking, desperate to keep the factory alive, invited Shingijutsu, a legendary consulting team founded by former Toyota engineers, from Japan to Germany. The team's leader, production guru Shiro Nakao, inspected the Stuttgart factory and described what he found as an industrial disaster. He turned to the executives and declared that what they were running was not a production facility, it was a warehouse. Master German engineers were climbing 2.5-meter storage racks to find parts, wasting enormous amounts of time on manual labor. Nakao likened them to monkeys climbing shelves, an insult that cut deep. In response, CEO Wiedeking grabbed a circular saw and personally cut the factory's storage racks in half, physically committing to the Japanese philosophy of lean manufacturing. It was on this altar of slaughtered traditions that a brand new power unit was born: the water-cooled M96 engine block. The M96 was Porsche's first water-cooled mass-production engine, built with cheaper components and assembled far more quickly than anything before it. But the real cost revolution wasn't just under the hood. It was on the production line itself. The most radical decision that saved Porsche from bankruptcy was this: instead of designing the new 996 flagship from scratch, they developed it on the same platform as the cheaper entry-level Boxster 986. The two cars would share 36% of their components, including suspension, interior parts, and water-cooled engine hardware. Combined with the Japanese production overhaul and the Boxster parts sharing, the new flagship's assembly time dropped from 120 hours to just 72. Speed was gained by compromising quality control, specialized cast metals, and heavy-duty craftsmanship. It pulled the company out of the swamp. But the acceleration on the production line had silently pulled the pin on a mechanical time bomb that would detonate in the years ahead. An automotive empire had been yanked back from the edge of the cliff, but the soul of German engineering had been sacrificed on a spreadsheet. The cost-cutting operation didn't stop under the hood. It consumed Porsche's design identity as well. When the entry-level Boxster launched in 1996, everything seemed normal. But the real betrayal was revealed a year later, when the new 996 was unveiled. The flagship, costing tens of thousands of dollars more, had copied the face of its cheaper little brother almost identically. The design team had consolidated the old multi-piece headlight, turn signal, and fog lamp assembly, which used to take 35 minutes to install, into a single module that took just 10 minutes. The result was a shapeless unit with orange signal lenses at the edges that instantly earned the nickname "fried egg" across the automotive world. But the real prestige collapse went deeper than headlights. From the front all the way back to the B-pillar, the hood, fenders, front suspension, and even the doors, the flagship and the entry-level Boxster were virtually identical. Elite customers who paid tens of thousands for a purebred German sports car couldn't tell, looking in their rearview mirror, whether the car behind them was a cheap Boxster or a legendary Carrera. The platform-sharing strategy that was designed to cut costs became one of the heaviest blows ever struck against the brand's prestige. As if the fried egg headlights weren't enough, the virus of cheapness spread inside the cabin. The previous generation's rock-solid leather and metalwork, materials that defied the years, were replaced with cheap plastic trim pieces. To hide the plastic feel, executives ordered a special rubber-textured coating called Soft Touch, applied to the center console and buttons. In the first few months, it gave a luxurious matte finish. But within a few years, UV radiation and heat cycles triggered a chemical breakdown. The coating began sweating out its plasticizers. Buttons and console panels turned into a sticky mess, like chewing gum melted on hot asphalt. The slightest touch of a fingernail would peel the coating away, exposing cheap, glossy black plastic underneath. Owners were forced to scrape or chemically strip their own interiors. The mechanical compromises under the hood were bad enough. Now every surface the driver touched was falling apart too. The soul of a mechanical legend was slowly melting away between production spreadsheets. And the transmission didn't escape either. When the original ZF gearbox couldn't handle the torque of the growing 3.6-litre engine and the new turbo models, Porsche reached across the fence to a neighbor. They installed the Mercedes-Benz 722.6, a torque converter automatic designed for heavy luxury sedans, diesel engines, and even commercial taxis. Marketed in Porsche's brochures as Tiptronic S, it was in reality a sluggish, lethargic mechanism that strangled the soul of a car built to chase revs. When the driver pressed the shift paddles, long seconds passed before the transmission brain engaged the next gear. The engine's predatory character dissolved inside the torque converter's hydraulic slush. German engineers had shackled a lightweight Boxster engine, screaming to hit 7,000 revolutions per minute, to a gearbox designed to smoothly cruise a 2-ton Mercedes S-Class. When Porsche's engineers transitioned to the new water-cooled M96 block, the simplified component architecture they chose laid the foundation for one of the greatest chronic disasters in automotive history: the intermediate shaft bearing failure. In the air-cooled generations and in the Mezger racing blocks, the intermediate shaft, which drives the camshaft chains, used dual-plane bearings continuously fed by pressurized engine oil. To cut costs, this proven design was abandoned entirely. Engineers fitted the rear end of the intermediate shaft with a sealed ball bearing pre-packed with factory grease. This bearing was marketed as lifetime lubricated. It sat in the very heart of the engine, completely isolated from any active oil pressure. The early versions used a dual-row ball bearing that was relatively durable. Failure rates were below 1%. But in the year 2000, executives pushed costs even lower by switching to a single-row bearing with half the load capacity. That decision lit the fuse. The mechanical tragedy unfolds as mileage climbs and heat cycles intensify. Over time, the hot engine oil circulating through the crankcase chemically attacks the bearing's outer plastic seal. Once that seal degrades, hot oil seeps in and dissolves the factory grease within seconds. But the oil that enters can't provide the continuous pressurized lubrication the bearing actually needs. Worse still, the bearing's inner race is fixed to the block while the outer race spins with the shaft at high speed. This creates a centrifugal effect that flings every drop of incoming oil outward, leaving the bearing to its fate. The starved metal balls overheat from extreme friction. Microscopic cracks and micro welds form on their surfaces. Eventually, the internal cage, the skeleton holding the balls in place, disintegrates under centrifugal force at high RPM. Steel balls scatter into the intermediate shaft housing. The moment the shaft slips off axis, the camshaft chains snap or skip teeth. In the millisecond catastrophe that follows, valves drive straight into piston crowns. The engine loses structural integrity and becomes a steel wreck. Right alongside the lethal IMS bearing risk, the M96 block suffered another chronic leak. The rear main seal. Owners would spot a few drops of oil on the garage floor and assume the seal had simply worn out. The truth was far deeper, a structural flaw in the block itself. At the junction where the two halves of the aluminum block meet, a tiny axis misalignment had occurred during casting. Because the crankshaft bearing bore and the seal housing weren't perfectly concentric, the spinning crankshaft applied constant, uneven, one-sided pressure on the rear seal. Even brand-new factory seals would begin leaking again within just a few thousand kilometers due to this geometric error. Oil that escaped past the seal reached the flywheel and clutch disc, causing the drivetrain to slip. The problem was so intractable that Porsche was forced to ship authorized dealers a special go, no-go gauge, tool 96991. If the gauge didn't seat properly in the bore, the instruction to the technician was simple: don't attempt to repair. Throw away the entire engine block and order a new one. And for engines that survived both the IMS bearing and the rear main seal, a third threat waited inside the cylinder walls. To cut costs, Porsche abandoned the legendary Nickel coating in favor of a cheaper silicon alloy called Lubricated. Under extreme heat and friction, this new alloy didn't always hold up. And because of the cost-driven open-deck block design, severe thermal cycling could stress the unsupported cylinder liners, occasionally causing characteristic fractures known as D-chunk. When the aluminum cracked, coolant mixed with engine oil, creating a revolting sludge the industry calls milkshake, and the engine seized, while the cost-cutting under the hood left standard Carrera customers stranded in workshop corners. The executive's greatest moral failure revealed itself in the top-tier models. Porsche's senior management knew the thermal and mechanical limits of the M96 engine with absolute precision. It was obvious that elite customers paying top dollar for a turbo GT2 or GT3 badge, or professional racing teams, could never be exposed to disintegrating bearings and scoring cylinders. The executives wanted to cut costs, but they didn't dare put the weak, failure-prone M96 block into their high-performance machines. So to protect their wealthiest customers and their racing reputation, Stuttgart's engineers pulled a legendary file off the shelf. They retrieved the blueprints of Hans Mezger, a master engineer who had officially retired from the company in 1994, and resurrected the heart of the Le Mans-winning GT1 race car. They mated Mezger's racing block with water-cooled cylinder heads and brought it back to life. Standard Carrera owners were left to deal with Lubricated cylinders and sealed ball bearings. Turbo and GT customers received what was essentially an indestructible piece of engineering. If you crawled under one of these water-cooled beasts and looked at the crankcase, you could see the casting number 964, a part number from the air-cooled era, stamped proudly into the block. The Mezger architecture rejected every weakness of the standard water-cooled engine. Where the standard motor used a sealed, grease-packed bearing that cooked itself to death, the Mezger block used a gear-driven intermediate shaft riding on plain bearings, fed directly by the engine's full oil pressure, a mechanism that simply could not fail. Where the standard engine used a marketing-invented integrated dry sump, the Mezger used a true racing dry sump system with an external oil tank, one that kept the engine fed even through 1.5 G lateral cornering forces. Where the standard engine used cheap Lubricated cylinder linings that shredded pistons, the Mezger used race-spec Nickel. Where the standard used powder metal connecting rods, the Mezger used forged steel or pure titanium. This bulletproof Mezger block gave birth to two legends. The first was the 996 GT3, the first modern Porsche to carry the GT3 badge. But the truly terrifying one was the GT2. Known in the automotive world as the Widowmaker, it strapped two massive turbochargers to a lightweight rear-wheel drive chassis, with absolutely no electronic traction control or stability assist. Porsche was forced to offer carbon ceramic brakes as standard equipment for the first time in its history. Simply because conventional brakes couldn't reliably stop it. The GT2's savage character, a machine that punished the slightest driver error at autobahn speeds, stood in brutal contrast to the standard Carrera's docile, problem-riddled personality. The elite who paid top dollar devoured tarmac with indestructible Mezger-powered machines. Standard customers were left alone with ticking time bombs. The executives had chosen entry-level buyers as sacrificial lambs to balance the cost sheets and save the company from bankruptcy. German engineering's supposedly unshakable principle of equality was replaced by capitalism's ruthless double standard, branding an indelible mark of betrayal into automotive history. The mechanical executions under the hood and the melting plastics inside the cabin condemned the 996 to the mercy of second-hand butchers. But at the center of this darkness lies an extraordinary paradox. Despite every time bomb and every despised fried egg headlight, the moment this car's tires touched tarmac, it became a flawless driving machine. In the rare moments when the engine wasn't seizing, the person behind the wheel experienced the full mechanical nirvana of piloting a purebred German sports car and forgave every sin within seconds. And beyond the driving experience, this guilty machine saved an entire legend from certain death. It sold over 175,000 units and pulled the company back from the brink of bankruptcy. And in the ultimate irony, that shapeless design the purists mocked became the inspiration for Sally Carrera, one of the most beloved characters in Pixar's Cars, cementing the 996 as the greatest pop culture paradox in automotive history. When its heavy duty was done, the 996 handed the reins to the 997, which brought back the iconic round headlights the faithful had been mourning. But in one of history's cruelest ironies, the 997 carried the same troubled engine block under its hood in its early years and continued to leave owners weeping in workshops. The 996 will never be fully forgiven for its mechanical betrayal, but it will always be remembered with a grudging respect because it pulled an empire back from the edge, a car that was hated for what it did to the brand and needed for what it did to save it. Thanks for watching. If this story surprised you, a like and a subscribe helps us keep digging into the stories behind the machines. See you in the next one.